Welcome to the Bookish Hour with your hosts, Sarah E. Burr and J.C. Kenney.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Bookish Hour. I am one of your hosts, Sarah Burr, and before we get too far into our episode this evening, I just want to make sure we've got some new tech setups that we've got in place to hopefully make your viewing experience and listening experience a little bit better. So hopefully everyone, our voices are going to be coming in loud and clear, and that you will enjoy our amazing show that we have. JC, would you like to greet our wonderful viewers for this evening?
Yes, thanks so much, Sarah. Hi, everybody. I'm J.C. Kenney, your loyal sidekick to Sarah. It's we got a wonderful, fun evening for you. It's an evening of firsts because we have our first dude guest as well as our first non-cozy mystery guest. So, the Bookish Hour is for all kinds of books and book lovers and folks like that. So, without any further ado, I'd like to welcome Rob Samborn to the Bookish Hour. Hi, Rob. How are you?
Hey, JC and Sarah. Thanks so much for having me. I'm good. How are the two of you?
It's almost the weekend, and
Yes.
it's officially summer, so that's something to celebrate.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
so to everyone watching, I am actually like still recovering from recovering isn't the right word, but like I read Rob's book and it was incredible. So I'm like so excited for this conversation. It's a when Rob first reached out to us to be on the show, he was kind of, because we had been doing mysteries, he was telling me, oh, it does have some mystery elements to it. It's like, I don't care if it has absolutely no mystery elements to it. I want this book on the show because it is astounding. And I think you guys are all in for a real treat as you hear Rob talk about his process, how this book came to be, and just how the Prisoner of Paradise just like exists. It's really exciting. And so, Rob, please introduce yourself to our viewers. Tell us a little bit about you, about how you got into writing, maybe even like why this particular genre or why this particular book. And then we'll get into the meat of our discussion.
Sure. Well, everybody, nice to meet you virtually. Again, JC and Sarah, thank you so much for having me on your show. I'm thrilled to be here and to discuss not only my book, but also, yours and your writing processes as well. So again, my name is Rob Samborn. I'm an author originally from New York. I do currently live in Denver with my wife, daughter, and dog. Came here about 2.5 years ago from LA, which is where I lived for about 20 years. And in terms of writing, so The Prisoner of Paradise, which is this, is the book.
Such a great cover too, like awesome
Thanks.
cover.
Thank you. So that's my debut novel, and it's the first of a series published by Touchpoint Press. The next one actually is coming up pretty soon in October. This again is my first novel. My real writing background in terms of what I really had a writing education in was in screenwriting. So I did that for a pretty long time in LA. I wrote 9 features, a number of shorts and TV projects, and also had a number of writing assignments. None of the features that I wrote were actually made into movies, but 5 of them were options. So there's this whole other world in Hollywood that's very different from publishing, where it's like you can actually make money basically without having anything made, which is kind of cool.
I didn't know that part of it. That's really cool.
Yeah, it is. So I actually originally wrote this book as a screenplay. And
Okay.
it was optioned by a production company founded by DreamWorks execs. And then it was unfortunately never made into a movie. But maybe it was fortunate because when the rights reverted back to me, I decided to adapt it into a novel.
Oh.
And I have to say that process was really incredible and eye-opening. The adaptation process is a truly remarkable thing for a writer to do, I think. And the story just grew organically into so much more. I never had the intention of writing it as a series. It was always going to be standalone. But by adapting it into a book, the characters just grew and the story grew, and the characters at the end, like, just continue to want to tell their story, those who survived the tale. So
we try
yeah,
not to have too many spoilers, but
Yeah.
I apologize up front if I do spoil anything as we're like asking questions and talking. So
same. And so for the audience, so what is The Prisoner in Paradise? So it is a cross-genre book that it's primarily a thriller blended with historical fiction, but there is a mystery in it, and a little bit of magical realism as well. And it's about an American couple named Nick and Julia O'Connor who travel to Venice, Italy on vacation. And Nick discovers that he comes to believe really, that his true soulmate is not Julia, but a woman whose soul has been trapped in the world's largest painting for 450 years. So prior to their vacation, he's an amateur hockey player and he had a massive head injury. So Julia is really concerned about him, thinks that he's suffering from delusions, but he's adamant that this is all real. And he goes on this quest to learn more and discovers this secret society that is hundreds of years old and over a long period of time has developed a method of extracting people's souls from their bodies, and then they imprison them in this two-dimensional painting. And the painting is a real painting by Jacopo Tintoretto, who was a Renaissance master. And again, it's the world's largest oil painting. It's about 80 feet wide by 40 feet high in Venice. And it depicts the coronation of Mary in heaven and has hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people in it. And all of these people are entrapped souls. And this secret society claims that all of them are evil. So Nick is desperate to free his soulmate, but freeing her means freeing all of them. And of course, they will never let that happen. So it does become this kind of Da Vinci Code-esque thriller in a way.
that's like when I was reading, I read the Da Vinci Code when I was in high school, and it just like the way that it captured my imagination was it really kind of set me on a course for what I was really interested in college. And so as I was reading about the artwork and the how the masters were incorporated into your fictional tale, I was just like, what did the research process even start to look like when you were writing this? And now after hearing that it began as a screenplay and turned bless you, Jim, and turned to a book, I've heard of books being adapted for screen, but I've never heard anything kind of going the opposite way. So I'm just like, I'm fascinated by your research process, number one, and then if we can like segue into the adaptation process after.
Sure. Yeah, that's a great question. And it is rare, I think, for people to go from script to book. Although I think what happens is there are like novelizations of movies a lot, especially like Star Wars and things like that. But prior to it being made, I think it is fairly rare. So in terms of research, that's a lot of people ask me about the research for the book, but no one has actually ever asked me about the research for the script. I guess they kind of don't really distinguish it, and I never really thought about
Well, you must
it.
have. I'm assuming that most of your research was done while you were writing the script, correct? Or did you have to do additional research for the book?
I did way more research for the book.
Oh, okay.
Way more. And this probably will segue into the adaptation process, but screenwriting and book writing are obviously two different animals, but I use the analogy a lot of like playing the same song with two different instruments. And imagine playing like exactly the same song with like a recorder and the organ pipes, or whatever the most complex instrument you can think of is. Probably organ pipes, I don't know. But you can tell it's the same song, right? And no disrespect to screenwriting or playing the recorder, it's not an easy thing to do, and they both have their own complexities and techniques and all that. But book writing is definitely far more complex. products. There's just so much more that goes into it. And so, I'll get a little bit more into this, but with a script, it's almost like you're writing a blueprint for another product that is going to be made by a lot of other people. That's not to say that you can just rely on those people. You can't. But a script really is essentially a blueprint, right? And maybe I should use the analogy of like building a house. So, but with the book, you're actually you're doing the final product. So I did do research for sure for the script, but not nearly as much as I did for the book. And I think there was two reasons for that. One is, again, because it was the final product and I had to make sure that everything was so perfect. There are times, and I ended up going down these rabbit holes because I love learning about all these different things. Like I write what I like to read. So I am interested in history and different things like that. And sometimes I'll spend like hours on research, which will end up being one sentence, but I need to get like something right. And I do like Dan Brown a lot, but he ends up like talking about like the dimensions of paintings and things like that. And I don't do that. I don't like to get into the weeds because I also tell the book from the tale of Nick primarily. He's the main character and he's very much an everyman. He has like no idea of art whatsoever.
His comments about it are really funny.
Thanks. So, but I also needed to make sure that everything was accurate. So I had to do that research to make sure I knew the backstory of everything and had it done, but then not necessarily get into the weeds and all that. And then the other thing, as I mentioned, is that the story, as I was adapting it, really grew organically. I really improved a lot of scenes from the script and added new scenes. So there's just so much more. The script, now that I look at it, even though it was optioned, it feels very skeletal to me. So I did like a ton more research on it. I actually took a trip to Venice for research after the script while I was working on the book. Yeah.
That is, that's just amazing. And I just want to take a second to do our, shout outs to our viewers who have taken the time to comment. So Mark, Claudia, Shanessa, Shay, and Laura, hi, thanks for checking in. And also Laura, thank you for saying bless you. I appreciate that. Sorry about the sneeze, everybody. But Rob, one of the things that I guess my big question is, where did this idea come from? I mean, this guy from Boston goes on this vacation, goes and sees this painting, this crazy hallucination that may or may not be happening hits him. There's a secret society, the cops are involved. I mean, where did it's sorry, I get this way, Sarah will tell you, I have trouble talking at times. And just the whole concept's like, where'd that come from?
Sometimes I think that like the stuff that I come up with is like, oh wow, like this is really like far out and no one's ever thought of it before. But like to take a painting and just like craft this incredible story around it. Like, yes, please tell us. How did you do it?
It's a great question. Yeah, thank you so much for asking. And it really comes from, there were two different elements. So one is that I've always been fascinated with like the intangible, indescribable attraction between two people that goes beyond physical attraction, like whether you want to call it soulmates or not. But it's, when you feel it in your gut more than your mind. And by the way, it doesn't even need to be physical attraction or between lovers, let's say. It could be just between friends, right? It's like a lot of times, and I think everyone has really experienced this, whether it's with someone they end up dating or just a friend or whoever, just someone you feel this connection to that you can't really describe. Is it soulmates? Maybe, I don't know. And I should point out that, by the way, I am one of the lucky people who found their soulmate in terms of a romantic sense, and that's my wife, Tiffany. But I've always found just that concept to be really interesting, and I wanted to explore it in a story. And not just an intense love affair, but really, like soulmates. So that's one side of it. The other side is that many years ago, I was studying abroad in Hungary and took a short trip to Venice. It was one of the 3 times I had been there. And there, during that trip, I actually saw a different Tintoretto painting. And that one's called The Crucifixion, which is obviously about the crucifixion. And it's located in a different museum in Paradise that's filled with Tintoretto art. It's called the Scuola di San Rocco. And it's in the book, by the way. And that's when Paganelli sneaks in the first act, and he finds the blueprint and the key. So that's
right.
that
Yes.
place.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And there's actually a moment at the end of that scene when he can't resist gazing at a particular painting. That's the crucifixion. So that particular painting, it's not as massive as Paradise, but it's still a giant painting, probably about maybe 30 feet by 20 feet high. And there's about 75 people in it. And what's really interesting about this is that most depictions of the crucifixion are like hyper focused on Jesus on the cross, or maybe they'll have a little bit more. This painting, using a film term, is basically an establishing shot. And it's pretty much an establishing action shot. And it looks like a drone took this. Like, it's all the way back. There's all three crosses going up. I'm not religious. I don't know the names of the other people on the cross, but crosses. But they're like raising them, and there's like all this stuff going on. It's amazing. There's probably 75 people in this painting. And what's incredible about it is that each one looks like a distinct portrait. They're also from all different walks of life, different races, genders, ages, social classes, you name it. It's obviously based on a scene from the Bible, but it's not like in the Bible, all these different people were vividly described, right? And like I said, of course, the whole museum is filled with Tintoretto paintings. And it's not just Tintoretto's paintings, it's all these paintings with all these different people. So I started wondering, like, who were these people who got immortalized into these works? Of course, artists still to this day use models, but when they're on this scale of dozens of people, do they have a line of people outside their door? Probably not. So I started thinking, maybe it was their souls that were trapped, like were taken from these paintings, and that's how they got immortalized. I mean, from their bodies, and that's how they got immortalized into these paintings. So I combined that with my idea that I wanted to do about something about soulmates.
Is the Ancient Order of the Seventh Son, that's something that you created, or is that something that you had found and like brought to life in a different way?
I love that you asked that question. And so for the viewers who have not read the book, the Ancient Order of the Seventh Son is the name of the secret society. And in the book, there are a lot of real things. It really, even though there's some fantastical elements, it was very, very important to me to ground it in reality, because then I think that the fantasy elements appear more real. And the answer to that question is no, I made that up.
Okay. Well, I was going to say, I was like, if you got to the end of that question and told me that it was real, I'd be like, okay, I totally get that, because the way that you did blend reality and like talking about, wandering through a museum corridor or going through this like creaky side gate and down into a canal, it's like, I feel like this was real. And so how the other elements were like effortlessly like incorporated in, I was definitely like, I need to look some of this stuff up, because I don't want to go to a party the next time and start being like, guys, have you heard about this new Ancient Order of the Seventh Son?
Right.
Because it
that
was
comes
just
up at
so
parties
well
all
done.
the time. Invite me to those parties that you go to where they're talking about that stuff. Does everyone wear like a hood and you're lighting candles?
I wish.
Does that where
well, I mean,
candles?
so that's where like I definitely, my obsession with candles does come into play. But that's one of the other elements about this book that was so intriguing, is that you really brought to life this order with all of the hierarchy and like the names of like the exalted master, the protectors, all of these folks that are just like roaming around Venice. And so I'm curious, like, how did you create a fictional organization like that? And kind of, where did you pull your inspiration from? Maybe were there like bits of real organizations that you looked into that kind of made their way into the order?
Yeah, I did research a number of different societies, the Masons, the Illuminati, Knights Templar, and some others. And I am actually a Mason, so I do have the experience of attending I'll say those rituals
Mhm.
and meetings. Nothing that happens in the Masons actually does happen in that order,
That's good to know. They
but
don't-
um, yeah, so I didn't copy anything, but
Mhm.
you can say that I got my inspiration from real societies like that.
Nice.
Well, that's pretty cool. And
Yeah.
speaking of inspiration, Rob, we do have a question from.
Question. Oh, Jim, you cut out on us.
Oh, am I back?
Yes, now you're
Yes,
back.
but we missed the question.
Okay. Yeah. Question from Shay is so speaking of inspiration, do you have any of the paintings that you researched for the book or your subsequent in the series? Do you have any of those at home, or do you have any of them close at hand for to be able to reference while you're writing?
Well, unfortunately, I don't have millions of dollars to spend, or even the space. So the painting Paradise is basically as big as my house. It's gigantic. And so no, unfortunately, I don't have any Tintoretto paintings. He did make some smaller ones, and honestly, like it's always been a dream of mine that if I'm like this smashing success as an author and I have the money, I will get one for sure.
Okay.
But all of them are in museums, and I unfortunately there aren't any Tintorettos in any Denver museums, but I have seen some, of course, in Venice. I was actually just in London where they have a few at the National Gallery, so that was really really cool to see. But otherwise, other than the research trips, fortunately we have the internet. And there have been many, many, many occasions where I've been zooming in on photos and like just going way in. I also purchased a reproduction of Paradise on Amazon. That one's probably only about like this big or so, but that was actually really helpful too. It turned out though that it was printed in the inverse, so that was
Oh,
that
wow.
was
Oh.
yeah.
Is there so speaking of Paradise, is there a woman in the actual painting that does represent or resembles the character Isabella?
That's a great question too. And yes, there is, but I specifically describe the location of her in the book,
Hmm.
not in a different place than where she
Oh,
actually is in the
okay. All
painting.
right.
And the reason why I did that is because I wanted it to be open to interpretation. Because there's so many people
Hmm.
that I thought it'd be kind of cool that if people did look at the painting, they could find the person that they thought it was that kind of reached out to them.
That I no, so that's a good thing for me also to know, so you don't bring it up at any parties of like, do you know that there's this woman in the painting?
Again, invite me to that party. I have to have a little digression here because so the location of the painting is in a place called the Palazzo Ducale. And by the way, we should talk about the your Ducal mystery series because Ducal is the name of this place is the Palazzo Ducale, which in
Hmm.
English is the Doge's palace, but Ducale is Duke in Italian.
Yep.
But for some reason, it's translated as Doge. But anyway, yeah, we have that Ducal
I
connection.
will. I as I was reading, I saw Doge and I was like, I know that a lot from like internet memes and things about
Yeah,
types of
but that's
coin
not
that are out there.
this Dogecoin.
Uh,
I don't know where that came from.
yeah.
Yeah.
But I'm glad to know that I was pronouncing it correctly in my mind, um,
Yes, you
because
were.
I mean I have a fascination with the history of like royal families, and that's kind of how my Court of Mystery series really came to be, just because it kind of boils down to I wanted to have a duchess who solved crimes, but it takes place in a medieval fantasy world. So I could play by
Right.
my own rules. But the descriptions of the palaces and the different locations that you talk about, how did you and I guess maybe this kind of makes more sense now that I know that this started as a screenplay, because I just felt that like the action was driving everything so much, but I still had a really great understanding of where I was, either in a building or in Venice. So I'm curious how you um, for the monuments and the places that your characters are going, and I want to talk more about your characters in a minute. How did you kind of bring those to life without, again, kind of bogging the reader down too much about, oh, well, the door was 6 feet tall and 4 feet wide and things like that. So like talk about maybe like setting a scene of a real location that tourists and people go through all the time.
Okay. So I'm going to actually I'm going to answer that question, and I'm also going to continue my digression, but I'm going to use that digression with the answer to your question. So
Perfect.
we're going to continue with the Palazzo Ducale, the Doge's Palace. And for the viewers who have not read the book, so most Americans do not know this, but Venice was the world's largest maritime power for hundreds of years. It was also a republic on its own before it became unified with Italy for about 1,000 years. And the Doge, the Duke, was an elected leader of Venice, but he was elected for life. And the Doge's palace was basically a combination of like the White House and Congress, because he lived there, but all the senators met in this building as well. And they met in this room called the Great Council Room, which at one point was the largest room in all of Venice. So I'm going to answer your question, but you were talking about parties and stuff like that, and also like talking about the paintings and everything.
Mm-hmm.
So I recently watched the new Mission Impossible trailer, which I have to say looks incredible. Say what you want about Tom Cruise, I find him really entertaining, and I love the Mission Impossible movies. And let's be honest, they've been a lot better than the James Bond movies for a while now. The new Mission Impossible movie looks amazing, and the reason why I'm bringing it up is because it has like all these clips. But I noticed there was this party scene that looked like it was in Europe, and I paused it. I'm like, oh my God, the party is actually at the Doge's palace, at the Palazzo.
Oh, that's too cool.
And then there's a fight in the hallway that I believe is in the book. Honestly, I think they ripped it off from me, but
Somebody saw your screenplay.
Yeah. So anyway, so getting back to your question, so setting the stage, this goes back to how I really wanted to portray Nick as this everyman who, he's really a fish out of water. And again, I really love Dan Brown's work a lot, but Robert Langdon, the main character in all his books, he always has this advantage over everybody else, that he has like this incredible knowledge about every single painting and every single doorway and all that kind of stuff. So I really wanted to write it from like a perspective of someone who's the total opposite, who has no idea of any of this, but also at the same time doesn't want to get bogged down in like the dimensions of the door and all this kind of stuff. So it was this very tricky balance of being able to explain it to the reader without also boring the reader. So really, kind of going back to what I was saying before, is like I would do all that research, I would know it, but then I would put myself into the head of the character to see it through his or her eyes without having to explain it in depth.
Well, I think the way that that it's presented, where you're talking about, Nick is your everyman, and basically how I would probably experience, going through these places, like, oh, look at that nice painting, let's continue on. But then he's complimented by Julia, and I absolutely loved Julia's character. I thought that she was so well written in the fact that like she wants to support her husband, but she also knows like he's had this awful head injury, and my goodness, he has so many more head injuries in this novel that it's like no wonder she's like, what the heck is going on with this guy? But she's also kind of going down her own road of exploration. She's on a new path for her career, and she's kind of like, she's in Venice. They're in Venice in the first place for her to kind of make some connections with some like a photography gallery, and I just thought that the chapters that were presented from her point of view, as well as the other characters that kind of pop up through the novel that also have their own point of view, because there are quite a few people that we get different perspectives from. So I wanted to also pose the question about how did you choose certain scenes where like Nick and Julia are together, but like Julia's the one that we're seeing everything through versus Nick versus, other characters like Carlo, and then we've got Della Porta. But before we dive into that too much, I know that we're at our half hour, so I want to talk
We
really
are.
quickly about the amazing giveaway that we have this evening. Rob has so generously decided to give one of our lucky viewers a signed copy of The Prisoner of Paradise. And I think Jim and I can both heartily endorse this book. And you know, if you haven't tried something like this before, I think this is a great place to start because, like Rob said, you know, you're not going to get bogged down by a lot of details, and you're just going to be like it's a really great thrill ride. So Rob, would you like to share with our audience what the magic word for the giveaway entry is?
Sure. The magic word is paradise. So this way, if you happen to type the title and you're not even trying to enter, you'll accidentally enter.
Perfect. So for those of you that are watching with us live, make sure that you're logged into your Google or YouTube account and just type in the word paradise into the chat, and we will circle back at the end of the hour and draw our lucky winner. So
We certainly will.
yes.
And I just want to make a quick mention, Rob, that David said this is going to be a fascinating read. So you've got a new fan here already. So that's really
You've already got folks hooked. So
Thank you, David. I hope you like it.
let's talk about your characters because you have I guess maybe present who you would consider your main cast, and then I don't like if it's too much of a spoiler. I'd love to know like who is going to show up in book 2 as well.
Sure. Yeah. So the main cast is honestly, it's a little big. I would say bigger than average, probably. And one thing we haven't talked about at all is that the book is also dual timeline.
Yes.
It takes place primarily in the present day, but I would say probably about 30 or 35% is in the past, in the 16th century. So there's two sets of characters. In the present day, the main character is Nick O'Connor, and then I would say his dynamic character is Julia O'Connor, his wife. And then there's another supporting dynamic character who is named Carlo, and he is a young Venetian painter who they befriend. And he's sort of caught in the middle of all of this between the good guys and the bad guys. And the primary antagonist, his name is Salvatore della Porta. And he's a Venetian who is the head of the museum, and he's also the head of this order, the Ancient Order of the Seventh Sun. And so the order itself wants to stop Nick, but he also has ulterior goals as well. And then there's a number of other characters. And then in the past, and I don't think that I'm going to be spoiling anything. I don't know. I feel like this stuff would be in the movie preview if there was a preview, and I'm not, I'm a big proponent of even telling people the ending. I'm not going to do that, but
no, I'm 66% through. So, no spoilers, please.
But, it's really about the journey, right? It's like you look at something like Titanic, that ship is going down before you start watching the movie, right? But it's interesting to see how that happens. But anyway, I won't spoil it. So I don't think these are spoilers. So in the past, there's a character named Isabella, and that is Nick's soulmate from the 16th century. And then there's also another character who is Angela Mascari. And let's just say that he is her lover. And then she also has a husband, and then there's some other characters there as well. So there's really kind of going on two different timelines at the same time. And then in terms, Sarah, to answer your question of how I decided to when to go into different perspectives. So I'm pretty sure I used 5 different perspectives throughout the book, if I remember correctly, possibly 6. And I'm a big outliner, and I do think that this comes primarily from my screenwriting background. There are people who write linearly in screenwriting, but I think it's pretty important to outline. So I outline the hell out of my work. And, just like knowing the beats of when I have to jump back to a character to make sure that there's never really that long a period of time where we don't check in with the character. So then if we need to do that, who is the best person to be telling that particular story, that segment of the story? from their particular perspective, that type of thing.
Yeah.
Well, that's really interesting you bring that up, in terms of having all those different perspectives, because not to get too far down the rabbit hole in terms of writing craft, but oftentimes as writers, we are told, for your typical reader, if you are writing, mainstream fiction, 2 or 3 points of view is probably going to be about as many as you're going to want to do. So I have to take my hat off to you because, with all the different points of view that you bring into the story, you don't get lost. And as a reader, and to Sarah's point, it really does help, add to that sense of urgency that while Nick is off recuperating from, his one little fight in the battle, Julia is busy talking to the British journalist.
Oop, Jim, I think we lost a little bit of your question towards the end after British journalist.
Oh, I'm just kind of going on complimenting him about.
Oh, okay.
So
we're just making compliments.
Yeah. So, but that was really about it. Just kind of so it was weird. I think it's a wonderful job that you did.
Well, thank you, Jim. I really appreciate that. That means a lot. And I should tell the viewers, if you haven't read it, you might be concerned about this. There's no head hopping. So it's all, each perspective is within a chapter or section. But, it's interesting that you say that about how you're told to really cut back on perspectives. And I'm pretty sure it's my agent who told me that I had too many at one point. And I did have 1 or 2 others. So I had to change those chapters, switch them around to the perspective of a different character.
So I'm glad that you said that, Rob, because it's the perfect segue. Because and Jim, what you had mentioned about not digging too much into the writing craft, but we do have some of our viewers who are writers, and where you mentioned, Rob, your agent. One line in your acknowledgement section, I was like, this is one of the most profound pieces that I've ever read in my life, because you said something that was, I'm going to paraphrase it, but it was, the writer is the painter, the book is the canvas, and the agent is the frame. And I was like, wow, that is such a wonderful way to portray that relationship that writers have with their agents, because otherwise the canvas is going to remain rolled up in a tube somewhere. So I'm curious to see what when you were shopping this around as a book, what it sounds like your agent's like, we got to cut down on the characters, but how from a writing process standpoint, what were some of the kind of other things that came to light during that time that really kind of helped tighten the manuscript into what it was today?
So I definitely need to give a lot of credit to my agents. I'm represented actually by 2, Kimberly Brower and Amy Ashcraft, both with Brower Literary Management. And, they really stuck with me through this process, but they also helped workshop the book quite a bit. So the original draft that I submitted to them was pretty different. Nick was actually a professional hockey player.
Oh.
And which, even though so now the current version, he's like a software developer, but he plays amateur hockey. But if you're a professional hockey player, it's totally different. Mm-hmm. So there was a lot to that. He had some celebrity, and the ending was actually totally different as well.
Oh, wow.
So I won't spoil that for you, but they really worked on it with me to refine it and make sure that it was the best possible that it could be when they were going out and submitting it to publishers. Yeah. So it was a long road.
Were you represented by them with the script as well, or just the book?
No.
Do you even have, I don't even know, do you have agents for script writing? I don't know about
yes. And I have to think about it. I've had a different agent and manager when I was a screenwriter. And I'm pretty sure that I was signed with one of them when I optioned the script.
Okay.
Yeah, pretty sure. It was a while ago.
So kind of on that line, along that line, can you share how long did it take from when you first kind of had the idea began to put it into your screenplay format to publication. How long? I'm assuming that was a fair number of years.
Yeah, and both of you are way more prolific than I am. So my hat's off to both of you, because I want to be able to write that fast. I'm kind of a slow writer. And, the first one also, I think, is definitely the longest for everybody. There was also a ton, I was working, by the way, and there was a ton of stoppage time. There's also the agent querying time, and then the agent sent it out to publishers. So I don't actually know, but I think that the amount of writing time was probably about 5 years.
Okay.
Well, and the reason I bring it up is because, for all of our, viewers out there, this is a reminder that everybody works at their own pace and don't give up, keep at it. And the type of research that I do is nothing compared to what you do, Rob.
No.
So I can pull a few things off the internet and go.
I'll also say, though, that the second book, which is done, and it's called Painter of the Damned, and it's coming out October 25th. That took a year. And the third book, I'm hoping, will take about 9 months.
Nice. So one of the things, upon hearing that it took 5 years to write, one of the things that jumped out to me pretty quickly when we're in the present day is there are mentions of COVID. And I was like, man, how did, when did this book come out?
This book was released November 30th.
Okay.
But
was that stuff that was added in towards the end as you were getting closer to public? Because I was curious, wow, because it was well done, and but because I know how long the publishing process takes, it's how did you do this?
Signed with Touchpoint Press November, I think, of 2019.
Mm-hmm.
And then obviously COVID hit, in March of 2020, and the book release was delayed about a year because of that. So, definitely kind of sucked. But I think the silver lining of that was that it actually did give me a little bit more time to make some changes and tweak it and stuff like that. And by the way, another interesting thing about it taking so long to write, and also from even the script to the book, is that technology changed too.
Yep.
So, I have mentions of different models of iPhones and stuff like that I had to update. Also, I put in some songs and things like that. I had to update those to make them a little bit more current. But anyway, so I did have that time to put in some COVID stuff. And so the book technically is set right around now.
Oh, that's what I was thinking, because I was like, oh, wow.
So I set it in the present days, actually, was when it was set in the future from when it was released.
Gotcha.
So it was released in November of 2021, when honestly COVID was kind of still going strong, right? And then I think Omicron, or maybe it wasn't going, it was still, it's still with us, obviously, but it was not a great time when it was released. But I wanted it, but it needed to be it takes place in the summer. So it takes place basically in June of 2022. So right now. And I can tell you, I was just in Europe, and it's COVID doesn't exist there. It's everything is swarming with people and stuff. So I got a little lucky with that.
So can you, without giving away too much, can you tell us where book 2 picks up, continues, goes back in time, or what's our timeline?
Absolutely. So The Painter of the Damned, first of all, both books I think can be read as standalone books. So
okay.
But it does pick up immediately following The Prisoner of Paradise. But I have I fill in what happens. And so it takes place immediately afterwards, and God, I don't really want to spoil anything, but
I think that's good then. Then that answers my question, so you don't have to share anymore for risk of spoiling.
I'll say one thing that is public knowledge, because you can research this and find it on the internet, which is that Tintoretto, who painted Paradise, actually painted 2 other versions of it.
Oh, okay.
And both of those paintings are very large in their own right. And one of them is located in the Louvre in Paris, and one of them is located in a museum in Madrid called the Thyssen-Bornemisza. And so we learn that the ancient order of the Seventh Son is much bigger than just Venice. So the
That's a good
second
teaser.
book has a part in Madrid, and we also what also happens that it becomes much more global. So the main bad guy, Salvatore Della Porta, he has a goal that would basically affect the world, you could say. So it actually becomes much more of an international thriller. And then the third book will be even more so. And I think what will happen is people will look back at the first book as kind of like an origin story,
Mm-hmm.
which is why you'd be able to read them as standalones.
Gotcha.
That's so cool. Yeah, that was one of the things I think you do a fabulous job in the first one of hinting that this there are ramifications that go beyond just Venice and Italy. And I just some of those nuggets in there. And I also have to say real quick, talking about the music, M83's Midnight City, love that song. And so it's like, oh, that was so cool seeing that in there.
Yes, and that came from I think I wrote that Julia could never get sick of it. That I actually put some of myself into because it's one of these songs where I've heard that song I think hundreds of times and I still love it every single time I hear it. Can never get sick of that song.
I think both Jim and I can sympathize with keeping things current and updated, because even though we we with the cozy mystery industry, it's like you have to push out a book every year, and you're kind of scheduled to drop a book every year, and so you have to write pretty quickly. But my first book in the trending topic mysteries, I wrote that in 2017, when social media influencers were not really even a thing at this point. And so making sure that you're making those updates as you're querying, as your agent's reviewing, as you're submitting, it's really challenging. And there are definitely some times where I will read something of my own work and be like, ooh, I feel like I missed that one during edits. I got to bring this up to date.
I mean, if you're writing in the present day, you basically need to write for the future.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, indeed.
So, question for both of you, actually. So, because you're both so prolific and putting out a lot of books, do you outline your books or are you more pantsers?
Jim, you want to go first?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and go first. First off, I'm an outliner. I always start with what I tell folks. For me, it's kind of like building a house. That I'll start with what I refer to as my story nugget. And that's for mystery writers, okay, somebody gets murdered this way. And then from there, that's kind of like my frame of the house. Mm-hmm. Then after that, what I'll do is I'll do a handwritten outline, couple of pages, just to kind of get an idea of where I'm going to go from beginning to end. So that's when getting the framing all put, all the boarding and all that kind of stuff. And then from there, then I'll put together a formal outline. And not until I have that formal outline that literally covers the time period of how long this particular story is going to take, do I actually begin to write. And so then that way I know I have basically a guiding document that keeps me from, basically ending up in the weeds. So with that, I would be completely lost without an outline. The other thing I also want to say is, given the genre of books that I write, relatively speaking, my books are fairly short. I only write about 70,000 words. And so compared to, for example, like your typical thriller or something like that, my books are shorter. So, just because of that, it is to a certain degree easier to, put out more stories, because one of my, I could put two of my books into one larger.
Yeah.
Oh, Jimmy cut out again. Were you...
I think you were about to tell us. You were going to tell us who the killer was, and then you.
So Sarah, over to you.
Yeah, when I first started doing this and decided I'm going to write a story, I'm going to write a murder mystery, because I figured, I know who my killer is, I know who's dead, and I know why they're dead. So I actually have a story right there. I just need to make it bigger and fill in everything around it. And my first book that I wrote, I sat down without an outline and I wrote it. And I have not been able to do that since. Because as you're writing a series, you're having to keep track of everyone, who your characters are, what they look like, what age they are, and all this stuff. So I definitely like have a running list of like, okay, when are people born? What time frame are we at right now? And as I've gotten kind of more methodical with my work and really kind of having to push out a new manuscript every 3 or 4 months, it's like I need to come out with a very easy way for me to understand what I need to write on a particular day. So how I often outline is I will take the days that are in my book. So if the conflict takes place from Monday to Sunday, I'm going to outline everything that needs to happen on those days in a very vague, it's not super super detailed, but it's like this is what the information is that my people find out. um, these are activities that the characters do, so that I know what needs to be accomplished before I move forward. And I've been outlining, I call it my plot by day outline, and I've been doing
That's
that now
awesome.
for I think the last 5 books, and it's made the sitting down in front of my computer and writing process so much easier because I know exactly what I need to accomplish, and
Yeah,
that really has helped me. I can't believe I ever not use I did not ever use one, because like how the heck did I do this and actually
totally.
make it to the end and have like a conclusion that sort of makes sense.
Yeah, I completely agree. I'm an outliner as well. And even though it took me 5 years to write the book, again, there's a lot of stopping time. It's not like I was doing that full time all the time. And I was actually using my screenplay as an outline
Hmm.
essentially for the book. But, I mentioned before that I'm a heavy outliner. Jim, I think you and I have pretty much exactly the same process. And not only that, I use the house building analogy quite a bit.
Hmm.
I think it's pretty similar. And then
Yeah.
sometimes I'll combine it with like, but when I'm using also like when I'm doing historical fiction, it's kind of like combining archaeology with house building and almost like
Yeah.
recreating what you're digging up.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, absolutely. I do find it to be faster because also like with the script, I'll outline and then it's like, you just have these blocks and then you just convert it into the script of the book. So yeah.
Hmm.
Sarah, question for you. What do you like writing better? If you want to answer this question, your cozy mysteries or the court of mysteries
Oh
series?
man. I think it really depends on how much I want to be, if I want to be in the present. I think I like being in my cozy mysteries because like, okay, like the world, I can create a world around me that's I could be in today and feel good about, feel warm fuzzies for. But then there are just times where it's so nice to really lean into the fantastical elements and not feel as, I guess, confined to genre expectations and what is expected. Cozy mysteries can be pretty formulaic as you begin to write more and more of them. So the Court of Mystery series really allows me to just be as much more free with my writing and my imagination and plot devices. So I think it depends on, I guess it depends on the day, but summertime I like writing the Court of Mysteries, I think, the
And are
most.
you the cover model on your book covers?
I am not. I wish. I
Really?
actually, my cover artist is he is based in Ukraine, and he and I have been in contact, and just checking in on him to make sure that everything is all right, and
Yeah.
and his work is, it takes my breath away when he sends me the mock-up of it. It's like, how do you take like this awful sketch that I sent you and create something so beautiful? It's really,
Well, I hope he's okay. And yeah, you both have fantastic covers, all of your books.
they're really fun. That's another thing I love about the cozy mystery genre, is that they get to be fun,
Mm,
enjoyable, and bright covers. So
yeah.
but
Yeah.
guys, it's 8:55 in on the East Coast. We have like blown through this bookish hour. Rob, this was an incredible discussion. I
Yes.
wish that it was the
Totally.
bookish 2 hour, because I still
Seriously.
have more questions for you. But Jim, you want to take us away on our final segment of the evening?
Yeah, just so this is kind of when we do our rapid fire, what are you reading, what are you watching segment. Before we do that, want to tell folks that if you missed it earlier, Rob is giving away a signed copy of Prisoner of Paradise. The secret word is
Paradise.
Paradise. So if you haven't dropped that in the chat, please do so now or while we're chatting. So I'll go ahead and start. What are you reading? What are you watching? And so for what I'm reading is, I'm reading The Prisoner of Paradise. I'm 2/3 of the way through. It has been really just fantastic. The world building is amazing. It's easy to read.
Oh, Jim, your
To
endorsement
be able
cut
to have
out.
something that's not too heavy, or too dense, I guess. And so it's just been a real thrill ride. And so then what I have been watching is I'm a sci-fi nerd, so I have been watching Star Trek Strange New Worlds. Huge Anson Mount fan. Check it out. It's a lot of fun. It's a real throwback to the original stuff. So it's just the best. So Sarah, how about you?
I just finished reading The Prisoner of Paradise also. I realized that like having this having our series like gives me access to like such awesome books.
Yeah.
So I highly definitely recommend this one. But I'm also listening I have become really, really, really obsessed with podcasts lately, and in particularly murder podcasts. And I have been listening to one that's called Anatomy of Murder, which
I
is,
heard about that.
oh my gosh, it's so good. It's hosted by a former prosecutor and a former deputy sheriff, and most of the cases that they review are solved cases, which is always a relief. I do listen to a lot of other ones that are like, and the killer's still out there. If you've seen them, let us know. And I'm like, so that's why I
Right.
really love Anatomy of Murder because the other ones were just giving me, I was like walking everywhere with like my keys between my hands being like, oh my gosh, is there a killer around here?
Nice.
um so if you enjoy true crime podcasts, Anatomy of Murder is absolutely wonderful. For what I'm watching, I can't remember, honestly, I can't remember if I shared this the last time, but I'm watching a show that's called Evil. um
Yes.
and I just finished the first season. It is about a priest, a clinical psychologist, and a tech guru that go and vet possessions, exorcisms, miracles for the church, and it's very, very well done. And in case I did talk about that one last time, another new show that I'm watching is on Disney Plus. It's called The Lost Treasures of the Maya, and with Albert Lynn, and it's real. I really love um, archaeology. I know absolutely nothing about it, but I love learning about it through documentaries, and that's been a really, really enjoyable show. Just seeing how technology is helping
Yeah.
like uncover all of these hidden Maya temples that are just hidden beneath the tree canopy, and so that's very, very well done too.
Yeah. So my turn. So I am also reading The Prisoner of Paradise. No, I'm just kidding. Um, but so I just took a trip to Europe, and so I was a little behind on my reading because I didn't really have that much time. But I was also able to watch 4 movies on the flight there and back. But so I just finished reading a book called The Petrus Prophecy by Gary McAvoy, and that is like a thriller, international thriller mystery, very much in the vein of Dan Brown as well. Great book, riveting. There's a lot of action and also a lot of history and interesting concepts as well. And I'm now currently reading a book called Little Follies by Carolyn Korsmeyer. So this book is actually not out yet. It's coming out. Yeah, and she asked me to blurb it, and I believe it's coming out in November or so. Really great book. I'm about halfway through, and it's kind of a mystery actually that takes place in Krakow at the turn of the millennium. And there's like an
Oh,
art
wow.
theft involved, and don't want to give too much away, but it's a very, very good book, exceptionally well written. And in terms of watching, so I kind of want to talk about this. Do we have like an extra few minutes?
Let's do it.
So I watched 4 things on the plane. I also finished recently watching a show, but I want to start watching another show. So on the plane, I watched the new Spider-Man, No Way Home, which I thought was fantastic. So Jim, I'm also a sci-fi geek, but I also love, obviously, like all this historical stuff too. And Sarah, I've seen a number of Albert Lynn shows. I love the National Geographic stuff on Disney Plus. I forced my daughter to watch it. She loved the Amelia Earhart show, which was really interesting. I think it's called Finding Amelia or something like that.
Oh, okay.
Anyway, so the new Spider-Man, fantastic. I watched The Lost City, which was pretty good. So that's with Channing Tatum and Sandra Bullock.
I want to see that one so badly.
So I think writers would really be interested in this, and also especially, when you talked about your cover model, I was like, oh my god, you got to see this. So it's pretty good. It's kind of a ripoff of Romancing the Stone.
That's why I want to see it.
Yeah, I mean, it's entertaining. Could have been better. And I saw Uncharted with Tom Holland and Mark Wahlberg. Again, it's one of these mystery, international archaeological historical mystery kind of thing, like Indiana Jones, and I just love that kind of stuff. It was entertaining. Again, could have been better, based on a video game. And then I also watched the new Matrix 4.
Okay.
Which was one of the absolute worst movies I have ever seen in my life.
We didn't finish it. I'm glad you said that.
God awful.
Didn't finish it.
It's like, it's bewildering how bad it is. So it was like, I was going to stop it, but then I was like, it has to go somewhere. Like, it has to get a little bit better. It honestly gets worse. Sometimes I recommend bad movies to writers to watch just to see how bad it is, don't bother.
Don't
bother. It's like, it's almost like a producer's type of situation. I think they wanted to make this awful movie, but it's not funny at all. It's just what in the world? And then I wrapped up the Obi-Wan Kenobi series, again, also a sci-fi geek, which I don't know. Jim, did you see it?
I have seen about half of it. My older kiddo who lives at home with us, they're a huge Obi-Wan fan. So I'm, kind of riding their coattails. So the last episode I watched was number 3. So I've got a few more to go.
It definitely gets better. I didn't love the first 2. One of my major pet peeves in writing, I hate lazy writing. And when writers have these lazy Deus machinas, it drives me nuts. And there's pretty much one in every single episode, at least one, that it gets to the point of it's predictable, oh, they're going to come and save them. But it gets better, and there's some great Darth Vader stuff in it. So that's kind of cool. And then finally, what I'm about to start watching is a new series on Netflix called Lupin, Lupin.
I've seen that.
And I've heard, so a friend of mine actually works for Netflix, and I asked him, he basically watches everything on Netflix, and I asked him, what's the number one thing you recommend? And he said that. And it's a French show, but he says, you got to watch this. And it looks awesome, so I'm pretty excited to start watching that.
Yeah, you won't be disappointed. It is fabulous.
Cool.
Ooh, I'm gonna add that. I'm gonna add that to my list as well.
Mm-hmm.
Good to know.
That's so. Yeah, we have a good reading and watching list for our audience this evening. So that's a good way to kick off summer. Make sure that we've got good things to stream.
The new Matrix if you're thinking about it.
Skip the Matrix.
All right. Well, you know what, Sarah, I think, thank you all for, hanging out with us a few extra minutes. We appreciate it. Sarah, I think it's time for the big drawing.
Giveaway. All right. Give me just a second to pull up everything here. Make sure.
And I will do my drumming on the tabletop
Drum roll. Our winner for a signed copy of The Prisoner of Paradise is David Plank. Congratulations, David.
Nice.
I will. Let me actually put our email address in the chat so that we can get your contact information. I'll make sure to get that on over to Rob, who has so generously donated both his time to us this evening and a signed copy of his fabulous book. You're going to thoroughly enjoy it. And
Yes.
again, Rob, thank you for being here. This was a fabulous, wonderful conversation. I'm gonna just like be
Well,
grinning about it for the rest of the week because this was really exciting. It was new territory for us with kind of branching uh, into genres that we're not familiar writing, but I myself absolutely love reading historical thrillers and things that blend art and secret societies and all that good stuff. I'm a big fan of the Sigma Force series from James Rollins, and this also
so am
like
I.
reminded me of it greatly. So it was a real thrill to speak with you. To our viewers, thank you so much for joining us live and for asking your questions and just for being here with us. Jim and I will be back on July 14th at 8 p.m. with our guest for the week. She is a cozy mystery author, Heather Widener. She's going to be with us for our next episode. So please join us then. Subscribe to our channel so that you can keep in touch with us as we continue the Bookish Hour. Rob, once more, thank you so much for being here. And we are going to sign off for everyone and wish you a wonderful weekend.
Well, thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Jim. And thank you to all the viewers. Really loved every single second of this. I'm very grateful to be on your show. Thank you so much for having me.
It was a pleasure. Thanks so much, Rob, for being here. Have a good one.
Thanks, folks.